Isaac and Rebecca. I hope by now you're feeling the love, right? This is such a love story, right? The story of Isaac and Rebecca is one of a very unique courtship which ends in love. Their coming together signifies the beginning of the second generation of the promise. Rebecca, Abraham's grandniece, is chosen by God in a similar fashion as Abraham, where she leaves her homeland and family to go to a place unknown. The genealogy in chapter 22 reveals that Nahor and Abraham were brothers, and Nahor's son, Bethuel, is Rebekah's father, making Isaac and Rebekah second cousins. This type of arrangement may be controversial for us, but a very common practice in ancient days and still practiced in some contemporary societies. An arranged marriage is a type of marital union where the bride and groom are proposed by a mother and father or someone of the couple's family rather than by each other. Specifically, the type of arranged marriage between Isaac and Rebekah is called consanguineous marriage, and it is one where the bride and groom share a grandparent or near ancestor. Examples of these include first or second cousin marriages, uncle-niece marriages, and so on. This type of arranged marriage is most common in Muslim communities of the world. Between 25 to 40% of all marriages in parts of Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Pakistan are first cousin marriages, while other consanguineous arranged marriages exceed 65 to 80% in various regions of the Middle East, North Africa, and Islamic Central Asia. This reminds me, back in January, my family, most of us traveled to New York to celebrate my aunt's 100th birthday. And as you can imagine, you know, my family is huge, and they came from all over, really, the world for this celebration. And so there were cousins meeting cousins for the first time. And there's this rumor that one of my male cousins dated one of my female cousins, not knowing each other, right? Not knowing that they were related, until the male cousin goes to the female cousin's house to pick her up for a date, and opens the door is my aunt, who he knew. And so, you know, there's like a running joke about them. But after the celebration, we all gathered in one hotel room, and we were sharing stories. And the question came about, if you were married, in love, you know, been together, you know, 15, 20 years, you had children together, and then you discovered that this person was your cousin, would you stay? Would you? Yes? So the majority of cousins in the room, which at this point it was way over 20 of us, said they would stay married to their cousin. I was struggling with it, I have to tell you, but they seem to be, you know, it's like, if I'm with this person all these years and we love each other and we have children together, and so that's what I thought of when this text came up. And it's important to note that this type of marriage, for the most part, is not forced. One writer suggests that arranged marriages work because they remove anxiety with finding Mr. or Mrs. Right. Parents and families and friends provide an independent perspective when they participate in learning and evaluating the other person, past history, behavior, as well as the couple's mutual compatibility. Also, parents and family provide more than input in the screening and selection process. Often they provide financial support for the wedding, housing, emotional support, and other valuable resources for the couple as they navigate past the wedding into married life and help raising their children. So it doesn't sound too bad. It really doesn't. Sometimes I feel like Anthony and I were arranged because we were, sorry about the frog, we were set up in a way that I had no idea until years later that this was planned out. And I'm thinking he knew, but he denies knowing. But I'm thinking he knew. And so the topic of Genesis 24 generates a question many young adults ask when they come of age. You know, where do I go to meet people these days, right? How do I meet people? eHarmony, right? Dating.com, Senior Match, Christian Mingle, Match.com. They are considered the top online dating sites in 2023. Online dating has evolved into a mainstream way of how to meet new people. In fact, dating sites and dating apps are now among the most common ways for prospective partners to meet one another, especially when it's so difficult to meet new people in public settings. Now, I myself have many single friends who have used online dating as a way to meet companions, and if I'm honest, many of them have found someone special, and some have even married. But there are also some disaster stories that you hear about. An older friend of ours who wears dentures, right? Just giving you the context, began seeing a woman. And so, you know, they're older, but they're trying to be young, you know, so they decided to take a trip to the circus, right? Something you do as a child. Well, he got caught up in the excitement of seeing the animals up close, and his dentures fell out of his mouth, onto the floor, down the stairs, and you know, it was dark, and so he had to use the flashlight from his phone. So now everybody's involved, right? And he's looking for these dirty dentures, and people in the rows in front of them were trying to help them find his dentures. Can you imagine? And let me just say this, that they are happily married today. So not having all of your original teeth is not a deal breaker in the dating world. So that's some encouragement. Some encouragement, right? Because it's not easy. It's not easy out there. Okay, that's the end of my jokes. Although Isaac and Rebecca did not have access to Match.com, they had the ultimate matchmaker working on their behalf. Isaac's marriage to Rebecca ensured God's plan would continue into the next generation. God showed covenant faithfulness by working through his faithful people. Because when you read the text closely, you see that every single person in this narrative seems to recognize the hand of God in bringing this couple together. From Abraham, who commissioned his servant to go to this land of his kin, to Bethuel and Laban, who recognized that this is the Lord's doing, to Rebecca, who acts with courage and faith and agrees to go with the servant to a home she knew not, God works through people to accomplish his plans. And though unnamed, Abraham's servant is a central figure in this drama and a model for us of faithful action. Given a difficult task, he does what he can and he leaves the rest to God. This is such an important lesson for us. If we're doing a task that we don't need God's help for, then maybe it's not God's doing. He did his part, and then he left the rest to God. He travels to the homeland of his master's family. He takes his stand at a likely place to meet young women, and then he prays and watches and waits to discern God's will. We could do worse than follow the example of Abraham's servant when called to a particular task. When we are commissioned, as this unnamed servant was, we must prepare, we must pray, and we must watch and wait. So he prepared himself. After he got the commission from Abraham, he prepared himself. Right? He gathered all of his servants, he gathered all of the camels, and he took with him a whole bunch of goods, all kinds of goods. He then prays. All through the narrative, he prays. His prayers are spontaneous. They're personal and focused on his relationship to God. And these prayers arise from a natural expression of life with God. Sometimes when you're going through your day, you see someone maybe struggling on the street, you might lift up a prayer for them. You remember something that you forgot and you just thank God for bringing that to your memory. So it's this constant conversation that you're having all day with God. And so he waits and he watches for a sign of God's faithfulness, some indication, some sort of confirmation that this in fact is the right person. And he's careful not to move in haste. But after he has received his go-ahead, he is then quick to praise God and to witness to the others of God's faithfulness. Quick to praise God. Almost every Sunday we lift up our joys and concerns. We hear about people who are struggling, and then sometimes weeks later or months later or even a year later, we hear, good, encouraging news about that person. In that moment, we need to be quick to praise God. Quick to say thank you. Sometimes we don't have a problem asking for what we want, but we forget to say thank you. Be quick to praise God, because out of his praise sprang a spirit of generosity. Generosity marks the actions of both Rebekah and the servant. Rebekah says yes to the water, and even took it further, right? And said yes to the camels. And after that, she was given all sorts of jewelry and lovely things. So there's a spirit of generosity that happens when we praise God. And the story ends with the meeting of Rebekah and Isaac. And it's worth noting the text says explicitly that Isaac loved Rebekah. This is new. This is new for the Bible. In the patriarchal culture of ancient Israel, love was not considered a necessity. It wasn't a necessary ingredient in a marriage, but it seems that God is also generous in this story, providing a wife for Isaac to love. In the book of Beginnings, and in this story of Isaac and Rebekah, God introduces and emphasizes the creation of love between a husband and wife. The term love had only been mentioned once before in Genesis 22 when God tested Abraham and reminded him of his love for his son. But what we call eros, romantic love, being in love, had not been mentioned in this context before, not with Adam and Eve, not with Noah and his wife, not even with Abraham and Sarah. But the text states that Isaac brought her into his mother's house. He took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So God is not only interested in divine promises and religious practices, human relationships are also a primary part of God's purposes for all creation. Love is a foundational characteristic of God's plan for humanity. God is love. And you get the impression that this marriage was not forced. The text states that Rebekah's family asked her if she wanted to go. Actually gave her a choice. This is very unusual for women in this time to be given a choice. But it's interesting to think about that in the Genesis, in the very beginning, women are given a choice. So this is not something that is impossible for God. So I wonder why it might be impossible for us today. Will you go with this man? She said, I will. And you might ask yourself, what woman in her right mind would say yes to a man sight unseen? Surprisingly, this type of arrangement has become common in today's reality TV world. Marrying someone sight unseen or placing some sort of timeline on their courtship, such as 90-Day Fiancé. Then there's Married at First Sight, Love is Blind, The Bachelor, Marrying Millions. I might consider that one. Similar to online dating or arranged marriages, these options may not suit all of us. But when I think about the contestants bearing their souls to the world, and some of them, not all of them, some of them I think just do it for the fame, right? But some of them, some who have a deep desire to find love, granted in a very questionable manner, but they are displaying some level of faith. All the while hoping to make a connection, desiring to find someone to commit to. And so there's a reason why these shows have become so popular. This tells me that what the world needs now is love, sweet love. That's the only thing that there's just too little of. Mr. Bacharach, right? I think we all want to be loved in a very, very real way. And so both the servant and Rebekah were asked to do very, very difficult tasks. The servant carries out the commission, and Rebekah and her family respond, resulting in the marriage. When you and I are commissioned by God to do difficult things, we have to trust that God will provide. This is what Abraham's lesson was from last week, when God provided a ram for the sacrifice. The other thing is that everyone has to do their part. There's so many people that needed to say yes in order for this thing to come about. Abraham also knew that there was a possibility that the woman would decide not to come. He knew that this thing could go awry. And so the conduct and response of all those involved are not predetermined. This is why we have to pray, right? We have to pray that people's hearts would be ready. You know, when God sends you on an assignment, it's a good practice not to delay it too long, because God has set everything in motion, right? Meaning that next person that you need is ready to say yes. But if you delay it too long, we could miss the opportunity. And there's one thing that might help us all move forward in God when the task overwhelms us. Many times when God asks us to do something that is something so far-reaching, something beyond us, and although that we might be afraid and anxious, we also have an unexplainable sense of peace, even in the midst of the unknowing, a peace that surpasses all understanding. And if you haven't felt anything like this lately, you might want to check in with God, right? If God is not asking you to do some things that give you pause, right, that make you feel anxious and a little concerned, can I really do this? I would check in with God. Because Rebekah understood, like Abraham, that she had to move outside of her comfort zone and stand in the discomfort of unknowing. And when she said, I will, when she said yes, when she made up her mind and made a decision, God gave her peace. God gave her peace. Will we say yes, even if it isn't practical, sensible, reasonable, rational, doable, convenient? Because those are usually the things we need in order to say yes, right? Needs to make sense to us. Are these the signs we look for when God calls us to move? There is an anonymous work entitled The Cloud of Unknowing. It was written in Middle English in the latter half of the 14th century. The underlying message suggests that the only way to truly know God is to abandon all preconceived notions and beliefs or knowledge about God and be courageous enough to surrender your mind and your ego to the realm of unknowingness. In other words, let go and let God. I can't think really of another way to be faithful to the promises of God. In order to live up to your part of the covenant, you have to let go and trust. We must let go and then go, right? It takes courage to go. It takes faith to go. When we are commissioned as this unnamed servant, we must prepare, pray, watch, and wait. And also remember that love is central to why we go. We go because we love God and because we love our neighbor. These are the reasons why a number of faithful followers are going to Maine today.